What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Stats with Evan, and welcome to my predictions for week 2 of the NFL season. Let's get it popping. Just a quick note. All of the predictions you will hear in this video and any video in this series are completely unbiased. These predictions are not a measure of which team I like more or which team I hate more. It's just a measure of which team I believe has a better chance of winning this game this week. Nothing more, nothing less. All 32 teams get the same energy. With that being said, let's get on with the video. And we start with the Thursday night game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Carolina Panthers. The funny thing is that this game might end up being better than last week's Thursday night game. Both these teams lost last week, but they lost in two different ways. The Panthers got beat by a better team, plain and simple. The Bucs had the Niners in their grasp, but their own miscues, namely 2 pick sixes, turned out to be their undoing. The Panthers defense should have better luck this week because the Bucs offense is nowhere near as talented as the Rams, and their offense ought to have a field day too. So I'll say Carolina wins this one 34-10 over Tampa. And now we go to the 1 o'clock slate, and we start with the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington Redskins. These two teams have a lot in common. Their quarterbacks are in contract years, and they're both coming off of stellar games last week. Dak Prescott threw for 405 yards against the Giants, and Case Keenum went for 380 in Philadelphia. It can also be said that both teams face a tougher opponent than they played last week, as the Redskins are better than the Giants, and I give the Cowboys a slight edge over the Eagles. I think highly of both teams' defenses too, but I think points will be plenty this time around, since the Redskins' offense surprised me last week and the Cowboys were right on par with what I thought they'd be. I think this comes down to which team gets that crucial stop late in the fourth quarter, and I think that's the Redskins, especially if Jonathan Allen can go this week. My upset of the week is Washington over Dallas 27-24. Up next, we got the San Francisco 49ers and the Cincinnati Bengals. Judging by how these two played last week, this game could go either way. The Niners used overwhelming defense to beat Tampa, and the Bengals nearly pulled off a monster upset in Seattle. The Bengals look about on par with how they did last September, but for the sake of Bengals fans watching, I'm going to just leave it at that. The Niners, however, look every bit the sleeper I projected them to be. However, I noticed the Bengals are already dealing with injuries to their key playmakers on offense. AJ Green was already out, but now Joe Mixon is questionable too. For this reason, I'll go with San Francisco 24-20 over Cincinnati. Up next, we got the Los Angeles Chargers and the Detroit Lions. This one's not going to be pretty, folks. A Chargers team that nearly let one slipping away before pulling it out in overtime meets a Lions team that did let one slip away before playing to a tie in Arizona. Melvin Gordon may be holding out, but if Austin Eckler can keep playing like he did last week, LA is in good hands. Meanwhile, for the Lions, they had multiple opportunities against an inferior squad in Arizona, but squandered them. The Chargers are leagues ahead of the Cardinals, so I'll say LA takes this one 31-14 over Detroit. Up next, we got the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers. Get used to me saying this because I'm going to say it a lot on here. Just because you won last week doesn't mean you were perfect. This certainly applies to the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay did not play a solid game at all last week and only got bailed out by Chicago's plethora of offensive mistakes. The Vikings, on the other hand, are coming off a sound game against the Falcons where they allowed just 73 rushing yards. However, a big question I had for the Vikings going into this season was, can they play like that every week? Much like Green Bay, Minnesota will need to step up their game this week, particularly on defense, as the Falcons had their way with the Vikings D in between the 20s. But this being said, I take what the teams give me and just roll with it, so I'll say Minnesota takes this one 24-20 over Green Bay. Up next, we got the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans. This is one of many games that's making me think extra hard. And these are the kind of games I love to predict because I feel like they could really go either way. The Titans looked like a well-oiled machine last week in Cleveland, but the Colts showed last week in LA that they may be the gutsiest team in the league. This is when I took a closer look at the box scores. The Titans took advantage of a career bad day by Baker Mayfield and had a short field to work with for 3 of their scoring drives. The Colts didn't have this luxury, but Indianapolis knows how to burn clock, as half of their scoring drives, 2 of the 4, took up at least 7 minutes. For this reason, I'll say Indianapolis wears down Tennessee's defense and takes this game 27-21 over the Titans. Up next, we got the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins. Okay, let's just get this one over with. The Patriots are exactly the offensive juggernaut we all knew they were, and the Dolphins are counting down the weeks until the season's over. Only 15 more weeks after this one, guys. Y'all can do it. If last week's games were any indication, this one's not going to be pretty at all. No Miami Miracle this time around. New England wins in a landslide 63-3 over Miami. Up next, we got the Buffalo Bills and the New York Giants. After beating the Jets at MetLife last week, the Buffalo Bills now return to the same stadium to take on New York's NFC team, the Giants. I am on record saying the Bills have one of the most slept-on defenses in the league, and last week, they proved me right. Their opponent this week doesn't exactly have as good of an offense as the Jets did, so I'll say Buffalo takes this, completes the New York sweep, and takes control of the Empire State. Bills win 20-10 over New York. Up next, we got the Seattle Seahawks and the Pittsburgh Steelers. To the Pittsburgh Steelers and their fans, I say this. If there was ever a time for you to prove me wrong, it's now. The Steelers are coming off a performance in New England that was on par with what I expected from them this season. Now they face a Seahawks team that nearly got upset by the Bengals. Heinz Field will be out in full force and the terrible towels will make their presence felt. But the Seahawks had a similar advantage last week and nearly lost to the Bengals. All in all, I feel both teams are about even offensively and defensively, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say Seattle takes this one 21-20 over Pittsburgh. Up next, we got the Arizona Cardinals and the Baltimore Ravens. This one's open and shut. The Ravens are coming off an absolute rout in Miami, and the Cardinals needed an 18-point fourth quarter to force overtime against the Lions, and they didn't even win that game. The difference in talent between these two is abundantly clear across the board. Although it will be nice for Ravens fans to see Terrell Suggs one last time as he continues his retirement tour, it'll be nicer for them to see another convincing Baltimore victory 42-10 over Arizona. Up next, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans. I'm going to be completely honest here. I have no idea what's going on in the AFC South. So Jaguars and Texans fans watching this, y'all might want to take these words with a grain of salt. The Jaguars lost Nick Foles during last week's game against the Chiefs, but Gardner Minshew made his debut and shined to the tune of 22 for 25, 275 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The Texans' offense was firing on all cylinders last week in New Orleans, but I can't say the same about their defense. Houston had ample opportunities to win on Monday and squandered every single one of them, including taking the lead with under a minute to go, and the Saints only had 1 timeout. They're going to have to do better at closing games if they want to make the playoffs, plain and simple. As for my prediction, I'll say Houston stays strong and just has enough to get by Jacksonville. Texans win 27-24 over the Jaguars. And now we go to the late games. We start with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Oakland Raiders. Both teams and their fans are feeling good about their performances last week, and as well they should be. But one team in particular, the Raiders, this is a prove-it week. Oakland has had their way with the Broncos last week, but the Chiefs' offense is marginally better than the Broncos. However, Kansas City will go into the black hole without their biggest offensive weapon in Tyreek Hill. This will make this matchup a lot closer than I originally thought, but I still think Kansas City has enough in their tank to get past Oakland. Chiefs win 31-20 over the Raiders. Up next, we got the Chicago Bears and the Denver Broncos. Neither one of these teams had an impressive showing last week, leaving both in need of a rebound. I look at these two and I see one thing as clear as day. Even though the Bears lost last week, it wasn't because of their defense. Defense is the only thing that was keeping Chicago in that game the whole time. The Bears defense now faces the Broncos offensive line that's among the worst in the league. This certainly doesn't add up well for the home team. Trubisky may have a bounce back game or he may not, but it won't matter because Chicago's defense is going to win this game for them. Bears win 21-10 over Denver. Up next, we got the New Orleans Saints and the Los Angeles Rams. A rematch of the NFC Championship. Plenty of Saints fans will probably have an evil eye toward the refs because of what happened last time these two met. But let me tell y'all, that is not what this is about for the Saints. For New Orleans, this is a chance of redemption after their defense had a chance to hold out the Rams on the last drive of regulation and again in overtime and failed both times. The players themselves will probably say the same thing in interviews this week. As for the 2019 iterations of these teams, the Saints came back to beat the Texans, and the Rams had a 13-point lead late in the third quarter and only won by 3 in Carolina. This means New Orleans is good at closing out games, while LA, not so much. This is why I say New Orleans scores late to take this one and get their revenge. Saints win 31-28 over LA. Up next, we got our Sunday night game, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Atlanta Falcons. Let's address one thing real quick before everybody just forgets about it. Neither one of these teams started out well last week. The Eagles gave up the first 17 points of the game before coming back to beat the Redskins, and the Falcons gave up the first 28 before coming back to at least make the score kind of respectable in Minnesota. Because of this, one thing rings true for both teams. You start out like you started last week, and it's a guaranteed L. The Falcons will have the crowd on their side as this game is in Atlanta, but this is about the only edge the Falcons have over the Eagles. Philadelphia is better offensively, and yes, Julio Jones is better than anybody the Eagles have, but my point is, who else besides Julio do the Falcons have? Philly has the edge everywhere else. And the Eagles also have the edge on defense. For this reason, I'll give this one to Philadelphia 31-17 over Atlanta. And last but not least, we have our Monday night game, the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets. Remember what happened last time these two met in Cleveland? This time around, expectations are higher for both teams. The Browns are expected to compete in the AFC North, and with the recent addition of Demaryius Thomas, the Jets are expected to make some noise in the wildcard race. Yeah, I would have said division for New York too, but you know, Patriots. Anyway, both teams fell drastically short of expectations last week, but now have a chance at redemption. With a pair of high-powered offenses, points are going to be a premium in the Meadowlands. All high-scoring games ultimately come down to who can get that big stop late in the fourth quarter, and I'm going with Cleveland to get it. Browns win 38-35 over New York. Well, that's my picks. If you don't like it, tell your team to prove me wrong. Anyway, until next time, I'm Stats with Evan, and I hope you have a 100% day. Enjoy the games, y'all.